On the line with us right now is an expert from Kasikorn Bank, Kun Gopsit Silapachai, who will be talking to us on this topic of the policy rate delay in the hike. Welcome, Kun Gopsit. Are you on the line?
สวัสดีค่ะ
Thank you.
สวัสดีค่ะคุณกอบสิทธิ์
So, Kun Gopsit, frankly, do you or do you not agree with the delay in the policy rate hike by the Bank of Thailand?
To answer your question directly, I would have to say that I would disagree, because there were certain circumstances in which the current policy-making decision has a certain process where it has to stick by. Because what we're living with now is that the Bank of Thailand's inflation targeting mandate, or its main mandate, is to make sure that there is price stability. And price stability is being measured by core inflation, which their KPI, their key performance indicator, is that they have to keep core inflation between 0.5% and not exceeding 3%. Right now, there's still threats that core inflation is going to be ticking up to the upside. So the appropriate response then is, of course, to raise interest rates in order to try to temper the higher inflation expectations, and which could lead to an inflation spiral upwards.
At the moment, how serious are the impact of the European sovereign debt crisis and the likelihood that Greece will go for a default on the economies of Thailand and Asia?
Well, on the surface right now, it seems that China is the white knight, which announced that they would be helping to buy bonds in the Eurozone, primarily the Italians. So that's kind of basically bought some more time. It hasn't resolved the problem. So we're still living with a ticking time bomb when the European effects will come on and impact growth. But I think to speculate on that and use that as a tool to argue for lower rates now, I think it's a bit too premature, because that situation hasn't happened yet.
Okay. And what about the Obama's administration plan to increase the jobs in the United States? We're seeing Bank of America today has just announced a 10% decrease in its employment within the next few years.
Right. It seems that there's a conflict of views, that the politicians want to see more job creation, but then on the business side, it doesn't make sense to have such a huge workforce, and they need to retrench in order to maintain competitiveness. So there is somewhat of a conflict. But having said that, it seems that the financial sector is still undergoing the restructuring that has taken place since 2008, when Lehman Brothers collapsed. A lot of financial institutions started to merge, and there are a lot of redundancies which need to be weeded out of the system. But I guess what the Obama administration is targeting is, of course, more for non-financial services employment, and they're trying to achieve more of the real sector, such as public services and infrastructure-related job creations.
From your perspective, Kun Gopsit, which factors are more threatening to Thailand between the high inflation or a low economic growth?
I think we have to take in consideration that the challenges that are going to be coming up in the next 12 months is that the West will probably be facing a deflationary environment. So if you look at Japan, Japan is a very good example of what the U.S. is going to be, and possibly what the European nations will be facing as well. On our side of the coin, we are very exposed in terms of business sense, that we export a lot to the Western economies. So in that sense, the growth will be slowing down, but it doesn't necessarily mean that inflation is going to be slowing down. So our challenge is living with stagflation. The West is going to be living with more deflation threat. We're going to be living more with a stagflation threat, because we have to take in consideration that how will they deal with all this huge debt burden, which I think that we've looked at this issue, that the Western economies will try to be reducing their debt through debt monetization. So what they're going to be doing is they're going to be printing more money. They're going to be printing more paper. So they're going to try to reduce their debt by printing more paper and hoping that inflation will erode or basically reduce their debt burdens. But then at the same side of the coin that the more money that they print, the more money that comes into emerging markets, because all money thinks that they're smart, so they're going to try to look for economies or places where there's going to be higher returns. And chances are, if you look back in 2009, we're going to have this situation where money is going to be coming into Asia. And then we have to deal with the fact that more money in Asia will eventually lead to higher inflation.
Okay, and what about the deflation and stagflation that you just mentioned? How soon will it arrive, and how serious will it be?
Well, I think we've already. I think that situation has already started to happen.
Okay.
I think that's why the Fed is more willing to accommodate quantitative easing, and to be honest, I think quantitative easing number 3 is already here, since their last meeting, their last FOMC meeting. The Fed did something very unconventional by stating that they're going to be pegging interest rates at 0.25 for the next 2 years. That is basically saying that they're going to be making money available for almost absolutely no cost. So they're not. By doing that, their action speaks more than 1,000 words that they're not scared of inflation, they're more scared of deflation. On our side, if you look at our numbers, and that's why I substantiate the fact that we need to raise interest rate, is that our core inflation right now is at 2.85. So we're only 15 basis points from our upper boundary of 3%.
That's right.
You look at other countries, and especially I think Hong Kong is a very prime example where an economy is like a sitting duck, because they peg their currency to the U.S. dollar. So there's free capital movements in and out of Hong Kong all the time, and that's why they have inflation at 7.9%, and China is at 6.2%. The other point I wanted to add also is that there are a lot of calls that the Bank of Thailand should not be raising interest rates. But if you take in consideration that they've been very accommodative in trying to spur growth at the same time, is you need to look at the currency. The baht year to date is very weak against regional currencies. If you take it, for example, that the Japanese yen is up against the U.S. dollar by 5.6%. The Indonesian rupiah is up against the dollar by almost 4%. The Singapore dollar is up by almost 4% as well. The renminbi itself is up by 3.2% against the U.S. dollar. The Korean won, and so forth. The baht today, year to date, is actually weaker against the U.S. dollar. So if there's a lot of calls for the Bank of Thailand not to raise interest rates, we have to live with the fact that, can we live with higher inflation then? Or if we don't want to raise interest rates, can we live with a stronger baht? So to be fair to the central bank, those are the optimal choices that we need to consider.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Khun Gopsit, for your views today.
Thank you very much.
Informative.
Thank you for having me on the program.
Thank you. Bye-bye.